how it operates under flood was something that informed a lot of the placement of these pieces. And this was just a fragment of one of the plan drawing that was used for the final exhibition, looking specifically at a couple of the spaces within. There's some dormitories, some teaching spaces, and I think some apartments, and a bell tower at the end, which related to a monastic school. I think I put this in an image for all the diagrams, but also because you can start to see the kind of repetitive nature of some of the pieces, but that every different adjacency and every different space starts to inform a different arrangement or a different use, and that was something that I think was key. This one might not work. So apologies, but the images on the right, if the video doesn't work, are just a couple of examples of spaces within the structure. This was going to be where I was going to close, but it's slightly less dramatic. Anyway, green wheel. That will be where I'll close. So, thank you. And again, if you have any more questions, then Michael, or I'm sure Michael can stand up and wave. We'll be happy to talk about it more in a little while. So, thank you. And I'll hand it over to Anna.
Forget that you stay just with one image, if not with the right one. Yeah. And actually, since the whole project was really about materiality, perhaps it would be appropriate to hand material in your hands rather than looking at the screen. So, especially for those of you who have managed to see the exhibition, which closed early in September, you could maybe have a look at the remnant of the exhibition, the trace of it, right there. I'll be brief, since you've been very generous in indulging us with your time and spending giving us the attention, or giving Warsaw attention. I'll just have a few remarks about how important that project was for Warsaw, and not just for me personally, but also for Warsaw, for the city. And so, can you get the image? Maybe okay. So the image which I wanted to stay with, is really the image of the cover of the book. That's the image from which I wanted to briefly move back and forth. The cover is, you would think, a culmination of the project. It's the end of the project. This is a catalogue of the projects that the students produced within the 2 years of their work. But for the group, for us, if I could say, it's not really the end, as we are hoping that the projects, since they were conceived as projects for Warsaw, that they will have some life beyond being enclosed in the cover of this book. The book is bilingual and contains material. It's in Polish and in English. It contains material which is intended to make its presence back in Warsaw and be an actual intervention into the city through the project, through its presence as a documentation of what has happened here, and also as a documentation of a series of events which were not just happening here in Edinburgh, And I think that's something I wanted to highlight. So I'll move slightly back to the beginning of the project. Mark was quite humble when he talked about his involvement in the project. He was instrumental into making that idea actually happen. For me, it was an incredible opportunity to work on Warsaw. I am from Warsaw, I was born there, though I'm really an outsider. I lived in Canada most of my adult life. So going back to Warsaw was also, for me, a process of looking from the outside, and a very schizophrenic process, because I am an insider looking from the outside. And also an insider, meaning having some knowledge of the city, since this is also an object of my research, and an access to the language and access to the history of the city, and sort of an insider or an outsider / insider, or hyphenated insider outsider, with this responsibility of presenting the city to a group of students, well, a group of architects, a group of students with a considerable knowledge of looking at the city, but no knowledge of that particular city. And it was a very interesting process process of constructing, first of all, constructing the whole field trip in a way that would reveal the city in a substantial manner. And the idea of inside and outside was constantly present, zooming in and zooming out, looking from a very close a distance, and then looking from far away distance. So it was a very intricate process of working between the briefs that Mark produced for the studio, the first semester especially, very intense series of projects, exercises, and a very intense field trip, 10 days, within which the group was to get to know the city, get enough foothold in the city in order to later on carry on with the project. And the idea was to constantly have this inside-outside look, and we started from a series we started each day with a specific place and with an interior. We started from within the interior and then moving into the city. So we started with a specific address and moved out into the city to find the foothold, the context, and make certain relationships. We also made specific connections with people who knew, who had substantial knowledge of that particular district, or who were doing research on the particular district, particular place. And those people stayed with us throughout the project, and they are present in the book, in their writing. So in a way, we kept a constant presence in Warsaw, and not just through working on it after, upon return, working through a number of projects, but also after a year returning to Warsaw and showing the work at the National Gallery as part of a group exhibition, together with a number of artists so this was the only architectural project shown in that gallery, a number of artists who were working on various urban interventions, so the projects from the first year became a group intervention, which made a presence in the city, and a number of representatives of the group presented their projects to the citizens of Warsaw, and there were really interesting discussions and interventions or questions, very interesting confrontation, and I don't mean it in a sort of militaristic way, I just mean it in interesting possibilities of exchanges. And what was really most fascinating was how the idea of the kind of legitimacy of speaking about the city from the outside was embraced in a way. Originally, in the first meeting with in Warsaw during the field trip, we had some questions from the audience, and there were some questions were very much related to that. I mean, how can we? And I'm saying, as I was part of the group, I was the us. I at least considered myself as us being the outsiders. So how can the outsiders look at the city and have any knowledge or develop any knowledge within 10 days? Or what can they contribute later to that city? What can their projects contribute? And I think this was a difficult question for the group to answer as well, because I mean, at the beginning, truly, I mean, how can you? I mean, you cannot feel very arrogant about your knowledge and possibility of doing something which will be substantially based or grounded in that particular urban context. And it was very interesting to examine the reactions or the conversations we had a year later, where it wasn't so much the issue, I think, or at least that's my assessment of the situation a year later. It wasn't so much the issue of the legitimacy anymore. It was an interest in the kind of approaches which were used, which were seen as much freer than the approaches developed within the city when you are really bogged down with knowledge, with history, with sometimes perhaps knowing too much about the context, so you cannot free yourself from that knowledge. And this was something which I constantly had to struggle with this idea that sometimes I know too much about a particular site, and looking at the project, looking at the work which was coming from the students who were freed from that knowledge. They had more innocent and perhaps bolder look at the city and particular sites, and they also looked at I mean, even in terms of selection of sites, it was very interesting. They selected very difficult sites to work with, sites which were not just empty, but they were filled with tension. I mean, they were not empty of tension. These were not voids. These were very, and this is how Warsaw is. And this is really quite interesting for me to see that how rich that city could be in generating ideas, generating architectural ideas, generating urban ideas, generating certain approaches to looking at sites. So sort of looking back, looking at the beginning of the project. It was really quite interesting to see the intensity, especially within the first semester, the intensity of possibilities developed through a series of very short, few weeks, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks projects, and how much of that freshness